into building the board. In this episode, we're going to talk about the safety position. We'll touch on the top draft prospects, as well as some free agency move the Cowboys have made and how those will work together ahead of this year's draft. I'm Dani Surek, and I'm going to welcome in David Hellman to the big board with me up here. Welcome, Dave.
I don't know if I'm excited or upset that you had me on to do the safety position.
Why?
Because it's the most frustrating position to talk about for the Cowboys in the NFL draft.
We will get to that. We will. The Cowboys have already made some moves at the safety position. They let starter Xavier Woods walk in free agency. He signed with Minnesota. Over the Cowboys have added a few veterans. They've added Jayron Kearse, they've added DeMonte Kazee, and Keanu Neal, who will be more of a safety linebacker hybrid. Dave, what do these moves imply about the likeliness of the Cowboys drafting a safety?
On one hand, not a lot, but on the other hand, maybe a bunch. And I know that sounds confusing. What I mean by that is none of these deals are long-term investments. Kazee is here on a one-year deal, as is Keanu Neal, as is Jayron Kearse. So these are not building blocks for the long-term future, but these are better players than the Cowboys have invested in at safety. Some of them come with injury concerns. Kazee's coming off an Achilles tear. Also had 7 interceptions in 2019, which when was the last time a Cowboys DB did that? And that's kind of my point, is maybe we're seeing the influence of Dan Quinn, that they are going after a better class of safety. Keanu Neal has been to a Pro Bowl under Dan Quinn for the Atlanta Falcons. So these are not big-time investments. These are not building block players. But maybe Dan Quinn is exerting some influence and saying, hey, we need some talented safeties in here, and that could be big for the draft.
Because safety has not been an area of attention for the Cowboys
Not
in
at
previous drafts. So if Dan Quinn is having his hand in all of this a little more than maybe in the past, or a likeliness of safeties maybe more so in the past, who are some names that you like to put up on the big board?
Well, unfortunately for the Cowboys, and I feel like we say this a lot, 10th overall is really not a sweet spot for this safety class. There isn't a guy like, remember Derwin James from a few years ago. There isn't that class of safety, or a Jamal Adams. But first round wise, see a guy on the screen here by the name of Trevon Merrick, who I think will be the first safety drafted, comes from right across the way at TCU over in Fort Worth. Heck of a player, feisty, likes to tackle, takes good angles. I think he can be great in coverage, which is why he will be the first off the board. The problem is probably not at 10 overall. Probably a guy taken back in the 20s, closer to the end of the first round. And then a guy that we're going to get to in a minute, Richie Grant out of UCF. And I'm just praying he's still there at 44 for the Cowboys to draft. Probably my favorite player in this draft class. You get over to day 2, still some really quality players. Again, maybe not those immediate game changers, but some guys that you can get really excited about. And as long as we're on the topic of TCU, I got to throw one out for my fellow short kings, because if Ardarius Washington wasn't 5'8", we'd be talking about him as a first-round prospect. He might have the best cover skills in this draft. If you're talking about a guy that has the potential to get 4, 5, 6 interceptions in a season, I think that's him. Problem is, he's a little bit taller than me, which isn't great for NFL players, but hey, I don't think you should be afraid to draft a guy with those types of ball skills. If for some reason you are, Javon Holland is a name worth knowing, the Oregon safety out in the Pac-12. I was interested to see how he worked out at his pro day, to see if he had the athleticism to be a cover safety in the NFL. I think he does. So whether it's 44, maybe, hey, again, if you want to drop Ardarius Washington down to the 3rd round because he's short, I'm all in favor of that because it gives the Cowboys a better chance. And then obviously the Cowboys are going to have 6 day 3 picks. Lot to like back there if you're just looking for guys with traits. You might remember the name Divine Diablo from Virginia Tech, a guy that was at the Senior Bowl back in January. Big, rangy guy. Like, people love to compare players to coaches. I feel like people are going to hear Divine Diablo and think of Cam Chancellor because they went to the same college. They're big, physical, tall safeties. I don't know if he's going to be one of the best players of the next decade, but I can see the comparison. And then a guy that a lot of people are talking about by the name of Jamar Johnson out of Indiana. Really kind of seems like he's flying up draft boards right now. So regardless of where it happens, like I said, probably not at 10 overall, but through the rest of the draft, I think the Cowboys will have a lot of nice options.
Let's go back to Richie Grant out of UCF. Our Kyle Yeomans is going to break down some of his Senior Bowl footage and tell us what Grant brings to the table. Kyle?
Thank you very much, Dani and Dave. And of course, Dave, you just talked about a little bit of a shorter player in Ardarius Washington. I'm going to let you in on a little bit secret here with the safety position. You don't have to be tall to be very good. And I'm going to show you why with Richie Grant here and exactly what he brings to the table. 6 foot, not very big either, still under 200 pounds. He is not a very big corner. He's not Trayvon Merrick. He's not any of these big-time guys you've seen in the past at the safety spot, but he looks like a corner even though he plays safety, and that's what's interesting. And that's what we're going to look at from the Senior Bowl. Bucky Brooks said it best on the draft show earlier in the year is the fact that just because he's a safety doesn't mean he can't have coverage corner skills, or corner coverage skills, I should say. And that's what he showed at the Senior Bowl. Look at this play. This is out of the slot, actually, from the far side of the field. Stays planted right on that outside shoulder, right on the hip pocket, and he actually forces an incompletion here on the backside, just trailing and shadowing enough to be in the right position to make a play, very nicely timed all the way through, and he's able to break that one away from Tennessee's Palmer. Now, going up against the Clemson product in Rodgers, once again, this one's in the middle of the field, looks like a corner. One-on-one drills, you get to see a lot of that during the Senior Bowl, and Richie Grant, of course, aced all of his tests. This one's right at the goal line, which makes it more impressive. In the back of the end zone, he stays locked on that inside shoulder the entirety of the route, all the way from beginning to end, no chance for even a throw. But then if you talk about the safety spot and what he can do behind the defense and at the top of a defense, he's just as good. He's not even on the screen here. He's over here. If you're talking about Richie Grant, the depth that he gets is phenomenal, and he comes up and picks off this Jamie Newman pass right at the 47-yard line, and then he just is off to the races. He's a 3-year starter, a former track star, and someone that had a plenty of production during his time at UCF. You look at 6 picks in 2018 in his first year as a starter, and then he was able to tack on a couple more in 2019 and 2020. This is a safety prospect to get excited about if he's available at 44. And Dave, I know you're really excited about it too. I can see it on your face.
The only question for me with Richie Grant is if he's still there when the Cowboys pick in the 2nd round.
That's the biggest question is, can he fall to 44? Because I personally, I don't necessarily think he will, because I think he's a great player. His tape is there.
Keep that to yourself.
Okay,
Let's not manifest that. Okay?
I'm just saying. I think it's a possibility he's there, but just a possibility.
Even at 44, the Cowboys don't have a history of drafting safeties, especially early on. Dave, how much do you see that philosophy changing this year?
I need to see it to believe it. It's that simple, because we talk about this every year. I was joking at the beginning of the show. It's kind of become like my pet cause, because every year I fall in love with the safety, and every year the Cowboys decide it's not important. You know, they haven't drafted one in the 1st round since 2002. The highest they've drafted a safety over the last few years is J.J. Wilcox, which was all the way back in 2013 when I was way younger than I am right now. So there's good safeties in this draft. There are guys worth getting excited about. The Cowboys have to do it for me to believe it's going to happen.
And I do think that this year, out of every year that we've seen, at least in recent memory, is the best year we're going to see the Cowboys potentially drafting a safety, because not only are the prospects available like a Richie Grant or an Ardarius Washington and players like that on the backside of these collegiate defenses that could make an impact, but Dan Quinn needs a safety to really run this defense the right way. He needs a center fielder. He needs somebody who's going to be able to be either versatile or set in that free safety spot to go along with Donovan Wilson. Just talking about Richie Grant, he split time in the box. He split time as a free, split time as a corner. There's versatility there. There's other players like that in the draft, so I think there's a chance that we see it this year, but I'm kind of with you. You got to see it first.
I will say, though, and that's if you're looking for optimism that it's going to happen, I think Dan Quinn is that optimism.
Sure.
Because he had Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor when he was the D coordinator in Seattle. Again, don't want to suggest that any of these draft picks are going to become potential Hall of Famers, but the impetus is there. Dan Quinn knows he wants these players. He had Keanu Neal and DeMonte Kazee in Atlanta. He knows how important good safety play is to his scheme. That's what gives me hope.
That's your full breakdown on the safety position leading up to the draft in this episode of Building the Board. Be sure to stay tuned in at DallasCowboys.com as we continue to cover all the other positions leading up to the draft the first night, April 29th. For Dave Hellman and Kyle Yeomans, I'm Danny Surek. Thanks for tuning in.